it gets a lot of flack, and I think it's something that is also, when done right, actually looks really good. So what I want to show you is kind of how I do dry brushing, and we'll see what you think of it, and if it works for you. The final result should be something that looks pretty darn good, and gives a nice impression of armor. I don't know if you saw it or not, but the Donator Paint Army that I did, the Arcanist Corps, the way that I painted their armor, minus the weathering, is how we're going to do Bradigus here. So I think it should turn out pretty good. The other thing I think that this is going to do is it's going to give a little bit of contrast to the purple. It's going to put some silver in there, which is going to brighten things up just a little bit more and make things look, make some of the details just pop out a little bit more. So what we start with is, first off, base coating all the areas that you are going to have the silver armor black. All right. The other thing I'm going to base coat black too is this front cloak of his. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I wanted to keep that purple. But this armor plate right here on the center of his torso, we're definitely going to do that in black. And what the black does is it helps when you dry brush. You end up only picking up kind of the high parts of the armor, and the black kind of creates a natural shading effect. So again, it's I think dry brushing is a great technique to get you through an army very quickly. I don't know what kind of success someone will have, winning a paint competition with an army that's been dry brushed, but having something on the table, having something with color on it, contrast, details, all that stuff, when your opponent doesn't have that stuff, I would go with that, man. So again, we're just base coating all the armor pieces in black at this point. And I sent you a message, Becky, about the glow effect on your circle army, if you have one, or if you've done one on other models, because I'd like to kind of match that with this guy, because he's going to have some glowing bits on him as well. So hopefully I hear back from you on that message relatively soon. A leather strap of sorts there, so I'll have to come back to that and touch that back up when we're done. I wouldn't recommend dry brushing on, like, say, a Warp Wolf. It's not going to give you the results that we're going to get on this guy, because the reason why is you've got too many flat open areas. But on something like Bradigus here, where you've got lots of little details and things like that all kind of mixed in, you should get some fairly decent results with some nice detail standing out. bottom of his cloak here. Just be real careful like. Okay. And why not? I'm just going to paint the inside of his arm here black as well, just for shadowing effect in there. Same thing on this arm too. Do this black. Gives that illusion of depth there. And then he's got these fairly large pauldrons on his shoulder here. Make sure and get those. Also got on the top of his hood here, little armor plate. To the side right here. These armor plates here. I think we will be throwing a splash of gold in here on these armor plates too, Becky. Just kind of here and there. Will again help improve the contrast, help break things up a little bit. Okay. Okay, now the rest of these plates here. Some of these we'll probably do in, like I just mentioned, we'll probably do some of them in gold. Okay, so these pieces out here on the edge of the cloak, I'll worry about those in just a second. I want to focus mostly on Bradigus himself. So let me give that a half sec to dry here. Okay, was Becky just messaging me on Facebook, so she told me her army has a green glow effect, so that'll be good. I'll be able to use that. So let me kind of talk about dry brushing for a second. So dry brushing is kind of, as you would imagine the name implies, opposite of wet brushing. Instead of having a brush that's loaded up with paint, you have a brush that's got a minimal amount of paint on it. And the idea is that you use brush. I like to use a flat brush. Sometimes I'll use a round brush. It just depends on kind of how tight the area is that I'm trying to get into. But you use a brush that has had most of the paint wiped off of it, and then you lightly drag that paint or that brush along a surface, okay, and the edge, the details on that surface are going to pick up the paint that's on the brush. Now sometimes if you overwork dry brushing, the paint can look a little blotchy, it can look a little spotty, it can look a little fuzzy. So what you want to make sure and do is work with just a little bit of paint at a time, and don't try to put too much on at once. That's what's going to cause a lot of that uneven look in your finish. But if you just, work a little bit at a time and slowly build up your layers of paint, just like you would with anything else, you end up having a pretty acceptable finish. And I think for armor, it's just fine. So I've taken my brush, I've wiped off a good majority of the paint, and now I'm just lightly dragging this brush across the edges of Bradigus's armor. I'm not worried at this point about getting paint elsewhere. It's going to happen, but I've got enough control over my brush here, and I'm only using a little bit of paint at a time, that if I do get any paint off of the areas that I don't want it, touching it up is going to be very, very simple, because I'm only going to be dealing with a small amount at a time. Tighten up on here a little bit more so you guys can see how that's looking. Still got some wet paint in there, so I'm going to steer clear of that for a minute. Come back to the front here. So again, you can see a little bit of overspray, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I'm not worried about that. I can clean that up really easy at this point, Becky. Okay. And now on the armor plate on the top of his hood here. Okay, now on the back, there's still just a dot of wet paint there, but I'll try and work around it as best I can. Again, not worried about getting paint, you know, on the cloak or on the leather. Very easy to touch up at this point. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Becky, the color that I'm using here is pig iron, P3 pig iron. I'm starting dark on purpose. Okay. Alright, so that's step one, is just dry brushing those armor pieces on. Okay. Next thing we want to do is take the Secret Weapon miniature washes. We're going to use Armor Wash. Okay, and now we're going to wash all those areas, and then at that point we're going to need to let those areas dry, and then while those are drying we can go back and touch up the areas that the paint went over. Okay. That's about it for the washes. Just add a little more in here. There's some on his plate, on his hands that we forgot there, but that's okay. Now, I'll let this dry. When we're done drying it, when it's done drying, we'll then go back over and dry brush, probably with a round brush like this. Okay, we'll dry brush the high points, and we'll do that with like radiant platinum or quicksilver or something like that, something bright, something shiny. In the meantime, though, let's clean up some of the areas that we carried over a little bit. So I'm going to start with Vallejo model color leather brown. That was what we based all the leathers in. And there's some spots on the back of the cloak here. Need to clean up. That's one spot we're good. And here now. Here a little bit. And here a little bit. There we go. We're good there. And then of course, Vallejo Game Color, Warlord Purple, and Hexed Lichen were the base colors the colors used to create the purple. So I'm going to put a drop of each on my wet palette here, and then I may have to mix them, to get an approximate value for the area that I'm touching up. Again, not a huge deal. So I think the worst offender was right here, actually. Okay, looks all right. I'm seeing another spot that I got to clean up some leather. Right here on the chest. Okay, that's pretty good. While I'm at it, I'm just going to grab some of the pig iron, clean up a couple of spots here. Add these metal plates here. Not add them, but get them base coated on his gauntlets. So that's good. This one underneath here. And then his gloves I will most likely do in brown as well. Seems like that would be the thing. So while I'm waiting for those washes to dry a little more, I'm just going to use my brush here and go ahead and base coat these areas. Ooh. Clean that up. Probably going to have to touch that back up with some purple when I'm done. So a little bit of purple I'll need to clean up right there. That got a little hasty on me. Got a little hasty on that. A little paint for the other side here. I'm not dry brushing. The reason why I'm not dry brushing these parts right here is just because I think there's a little more at stake as far as areas that can end up getting messed up, as I've already demonstrated. So just going with the regular hand brush at this point. But that went a lot faster than than this is going. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to show that to you, Becky, was when done properly, dry brushing really can look good, and it can be quite the time saver. Okay. You start to come along. Okay, and then of course down here we've got the rock, the stone that he's standing on top of. What I want to do is take some Army Painter Strong Tone now, and I'm just going to go back in and wash a couple areas of the brown leather that I had touched up, just to add that wash back in there. And then once this dries, we're going to add in some red ink, excuse me, some brown ink, to richen the color up a little bit. Then I'll do a little bit of highlighting on it and the leather will be done. And same on the back here. Not too worried about this wash getting on the armor that I've already painted at this point. Do okay. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to clean up this area where the silver got away from me a little bit more. Okay, that looks alright. Alright, so this wash is taking a little longer to dry. And it looks like the metal is still a little wet too. So I'm going to go ahead and call this on Bradigus for now because this has got to dry for a bit. So for those of you at home, thanks for hanging out and watching tonight. Appreciate it. I should be streaming again a little later next week, maybe even tomorrow a little bit. But I appreciate you guys tuning in today and watching. If you have any questions, make sure to email me at redmodeling@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook at facebook.com/redmodelingpaint. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll talk to you later.